opens us.
So feel free to please introduce yourself in the chat with the county or region that you're calling in from. And we're gonna get started. So thank you all for coming to the informational webinar for this year's SPI state application cycle. We're so excited to have you all here with us today, and we get to have one of our current fellows speak on their experience, and you can ask them questions directly. My name is Janine. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a program manager and a proud SPI state alum, and I'm coming to you all from Kumi Island, otherwise known as San Diego. I'll pass it on to Elizabeth to introduce herself.
Buenas tardes. Yeah, buenas tardes todos. My name is Elizabeth Ayala, pronouns she, her. I'm in Cahuilla, Serrano, and Luiseño land, also known as Riverside in SoCal, and welcome everyone.
For some logistics, we'll reserve questions for the Q&A at the end of the webinar, and feel free to post questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentations, because it'll be hard for us to track the questions that come along the chat. And please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the slides and the recording will be made available to you after this session, so no need to screenshot when you see a lot of dates. Here's an overview for what we have allotted for this hour today. We're going to share information on Women's Foundation California. We'll introduce you to the Dr. Beatriz Marie Solís Policy Institute, or SPI, formerly known as the Women's Policy Institute, or WI. And share more information about the structure of the program. We'll have a current fellow speak with you all on their experience in SPI. And we'll go over the application process, and last but not least, we'll have the Q&A portion, and we'll ask you to submit all your questions in the Q&A box. So just to get us started, the Women's Foundation California is a statewide publicly supported foundation dedicated to investing in, training, and connecting community leaders to advance gender, racial, and economic justice by centering the experience and expertise of the communities most impacted by systemic injustice. We are defined by a feminist, intersectional, multi-issue movement building approach, and our core values as an organization are community justice and well-being. We raise money to provide grants to community-led organizations, train community-based leaders through our renowned Solís Policy Institute, and foster a community of advocates, donors, policymakers, grant makers, academics, and many others through convenings to share knowledge and strengthen the social justice movement in California. Today, we'll focus on the train component of the Women's Foundation strategy, but if you have questions about other aspects of our work, please feel free to reach out to us. The foundation launched the Solís Policy Institute, then known as the Women's Policy Institute, in 2003, and we spent more than 2 years conducting research, talking with stakeholders, and designing this nationally recognized program. In our research, we identified the need for community-based organizations and leaders to influence policy in order to ensure that progressive change was happening in California. The Solís Policy Institute, the flagship program of Women's Foundation California, will be starting the 22nd year with the 2025 class and is widely recognized as one of the most successful policy advocacy training programs in the U.S. I'll pass it on to Elizabeth to share more about the history of the Solís Policy Institute.
Yes, so to date, the Policy Institute has yielded tremendous success, and we measure that by more than a couple different factors. So we have trained over 600 leaders in public policy since the Institute began in 2003. Over 70 state bills worked on by our fellows have made it through both houses of the legislature onto the governor's desk, and over 50 of those bills have been signed into law. 3 years ago, we changed our name to the Dr. Beatriz Maria Solís Policy Institute in honor of the late B. Solís and in partnership with the California Endowment. Our new SPI Institute celebrates B's commitment to championing the leadership of self-identifying women and girls of color and gender-expansive people across the state. And it allows the Institute to identify with a broad range of gender expressions and identities. So we're really grateful that the Institute's name will be a more accurate reflection of our community, our supporters, and our values. So each year, the Policy Institute trains 20 to 25 individuals. And this year-long process is a fellowship where we teach community-based leaders like yourselves how to be effective advocates and create tangible policy goals for your community. And so why an institute? So our theory of change rests on the belief that bringing individuals who experience gender, racial, economic injustice into the policy process and is intentionally contributing to social justice movements by ensuring that the policy arena is representative of the communities who are most impacted, and it will change the culture and shape of policy. So as an organization based on gender justice, we recognize that gender-based discrimination and violence disproportionately impacts transgender people. And so our goal is to increase the number of non-binary and genderqueer people, cisgender and transgender women, transgender men involved in the policy arena, and to increase the number of policies that reflect the needs and realities of Black and Indigenous and communities of color, immigrant communities, low-income communities, and rural communities. So you can review our website for more information about our TGI or transgender, gender variant, and intersex values. And so with the Institute, we aim to strengthen the leadership, advocacy, and public policy knowledge of our participants so that these skill sets can be applied to all levels of government, local, state, and national issues, and to support participants as they develop these skills. So in doing so, we are strengthening links between grassroots organizations, such as the ones you all work with, and policymakers, encouraging lasting relationships among grassroots leaders within and between movements. So that's one of the reasons we have multiple issues represented in the Institute. So our Institute, right, exists because our communities have been excluded from the policy process by design, and because structural inequities are embedded in government. The program's primary objective is to train participants on how to create progressive change within the current system, within the current legislative system. So while we also recognize that ultimately the process itself has to change. So we highlight this because the current process is not always a welcoming place. It's based on white, heterosexual, mostly cisgender male norms, and can discount community voices, as many of you probably already know, have already faced. And so we strive to select trainers and speakers who reflect the diversity of the Policy Institute and our communities in California. But there will be times, sometimes days, when you won't see your community's diversity reflected in the folks of the front of the room or who you're meeting in the Capitol, for example. So we are also committed to changing that within and through the Policy Institute. And again, the more of us with policy advocacy skills, the more of us who can train others, not just within our halls or programs, but beyond.
Thank you, Elizabeth. After conducting a 10-year retrospective assessment of the Institute, we found that besides the SPI fellows trained and bills signed into law, which is over 50 bills as of today, our impact is much broader when one takes our alums' ongoing efforts into account. So the success of dozens upon dozens of bills and local policy advocacy projects can be traced to the efforts of alums who have continued to work in policy advocacy long after their time with SPI. In fact, 76% of alums are still engaged in policy advocacy post-SPI. 75% of such alums report greater advocacy engagement post-SPI, and 92% of those alums attribute this increase in advocacy to SPI. And you'll be entering a network of over 600 alums across the state and across the nation who are doing policy work. I'm going to go over the 5 things to know about SPI that are really important for you to understand as you undergo the application process and start thinking about what a year ahead could look like, what your year ahead will look like should you apply to the Institute and be selected. First is that the SPI is team-based. We place accepted applicants into teams of 5 people by issue area. So it's important that you come into SPI with an ability to work well with others, compromise, and work out differences quickly. The policy process is based on a very strict legislative timeline that will push you and your team to move your bill forward, and oftentimes doesn't leave much room for delay. Second, the SPI revolves around an experiential learning and a learning while doing approach. This is a training program, but the bill that you choose is real. Once your team has chosen a bill, you and your teammates will do everything related to it. You'll find the author, work with the author's staff, conduct the research on your bill idea, and do all the lobbying. The bill belongs to your team. You own it. We know that fellows who feel they've learned the most were able to get their bill to the governor's desk, and that was because their bill was movable. We want the bills to move as far along in the legislative process as possible for your own learning. And remember that your team may choose a policy idea that is not a priority for you, your agency, or your organization, and the program still requires you to work on your team's bill. So make sure that your agency, your organization, your supervisor knows that they must give you paid staff time to participate fully in SPI, even if the bill isn't directly related to your organization. Third, the SPI fosters individual leadership development. One of our priorities is to help our fellows grow their leadership skills, eliminate self-limiting thoughts and behaviors, step out of their comfort zone, and increase personal agency. Our alums overwhelmingly feel that they grew more confident as a result of their participation in SPI. Fourth, the SPI operates with an intersectional framework, meaning our cohorts engage in conversations about anti-oppressive policymaking, power, gender identities, and more. Our fellows are expected to participate in these conversations as we believe this is integral to creating policy that empowers our communities. We are committed to responding to and prioritizing Black, Indigenous, people of color, and trans leadership. So the 2025 year will especially focus on ensuring that we create policy that integrates an anti-racism and transgender justice lens. Fifth, the SPI emphasizes cross-movement building. One of the beauties of SPI is that it brings together members of various social movements, many of which have been siloed for decades. Fellows take part in a fair amount of inter-team work time, which allows for each team to incorporate ideas grounded in other social justice perspectives. You should expect to learn, grow, and be pushed by your fellow SPIers. Cross-movement building learning is an integral part of the Women's Foundation strategy for building broader and more interconnected social justice networks in California. That being said, we're going to go over the Institute schedule. It is a rigorous program, and these dates are up on the website, and you will have the slides after. The SPI includes 4 training retreats that are 2 to 4 days long. The first and fourth retreat are in person in Sacramento. Retreat 2 and 3 are held online. And the retreats include lectures and time to work on your bill and are essential to the fellows' learning. These retreats also give you a space to meet some of the most important players in the legislative process: advocates, staffers, legislators, government employees, and lobbyists. And we know these retreats are exhausting, so do not plan to do on other work during these retreats. Tell your supervisor that you'll not be able to do any work during the retreats, and only apply if you can make this commitment and fully attend all 4 retreats. We again ask you to check what retreat and seminar dates and make sure that you're available to participate in each retreat for the entire retreat and each seminar, which is held virtually for each seminar. And block those days off in your calendar before you apply in case you're accepted into the program. We require transparency about your attendance as part of the interview process, and that includes an in-person lobbying day in January, which we expect to have same-day travel, and often your team should have already started pitching in December, but if you still don't have an author, and even if you do, you'll be required to go up to Sacramento for in-person lobbying to make sure that your bill is in the best place before the legislative deadline. So again, really want you all to take into account that this is a critical part of the program, and attendance is required for both the virtual seminars, virtual retreats, and in-person retreats. These dates are up on the webpage for you to reference, and the PowerPoint slides will also be made available. And depending on how the class goes, we may add a seminar or two depending on the year. And we'll provide you with as much advance notice as possible, and we will always record our virtual seminars and retreats. That being said, what does the year look like? In Retreat 1, which will be held in October, you will spend time getting to know each other, getting to know us and your mentor. We'll discuss the SPI, begin teaching you the policy process, and focusing on the legislative process. You'll meet with your team in person and experts in your issue area and decide on 2 to 3 policy project areas. We'll also include sessions that reflect our intersectional values, such as examining dominant culture and transgender, gender variant, and intersex justice trainings. Then in Retreat 2 in December, which will be held virtually, you'll finalize your policy project and begin to look for a potential author. You will continue to integrate a gender, racial, and economic lens into your projects as necessary, and we will continue with trainings that reflect our intersectional framework. And as I mentioned, in January, we'll have a lobbying day or a bill pitching day. And ideally, teams will begin pitching bill ideas in December. But we still have this organized single day of travel to Sacramento to secure the bill authors or to try again. And then in Retreat 3 will be held in March, again virtually. We get you ready for hearings, prepare you to do testimony, including having a mock hearing where you all will testify to mock legislators on your bill. And we will also have a public speaking training who works with you on your testimony, and we will be working on your communications and advocacy strategies. And Retreat 4 will be held in May and will be in Sacramento. And during the 4th retreat, we prepare pitches for legislative reception, and where you'll have visits, networking tips, and opportunities for in-person meetings at the Capitol and how to prepare for the second house. Between each of these retreats, you'll have weekly team calls, be required to read materials and view supplemental lessons, participate in 9 seminars, in addition to conducting significant team and individual work to advance your bill. So now, hearing about all of the to-dos and items, I'm excited to get to pass the mic to Thuy Do, who's a current SPI State Fellow on the Health and Prosperity team, to speak about their experience in the SPI. Before I hand it off to Thuy, I'll read Thuy's bio. Thuy Do resides in Sacramento after she and her family resettled from Vietnam. She is the Senior California Program Manager at Southeast Asia Resource Action Center. In her role, Thuy leads state-level initiatives, including program coordination, implementation, technical support, and coalition management. She is passionate about fostering strong partnerships, building the capacity of community leaders, and supporting advocacy activities to advance CROC's priorities in health, education, and immigration within Southeast Asian communities. With nearly a decade of healthcare experience in managing multiple projects, developing diverse relationships, and collaborating in a fast-paced environment, Thuy brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to her work. She's eager to continue creating powerful changes for the Southeast Asian community in California. In her free time, she enjoys facilitating yoga and sound baths to encourage integrative wellness for the mind, body, and spirit. And so without further ado, we've asked Thuy to talk a little bit about their team, their learnings, and their favorite and most challenging moments in the SPI fellowship. I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. Welcome, everyone. This is really exciting to have folks join this informational meeting and webinar. I'm Thuy Do, and I am one of the fellows from the Health and Prosperity team. And so what we focus on is quite broad, but we do emphasize on the economical sustainability and wellness of others and how that impacts, policy, and also in my work at CRAC. Our bill right now has passed through the Assembly to the Senate, and our bill is AB 2136, which is to creates unification and in the existing law, allowing more jurisdiction to implement drug checking services. And for example, institutions such as UCLA having these types of programs to help folks be more well-informed in the contaminants or the purity of what their usage is, or the controlled substance use would be, and ensuring that there are no lives that, like, fewer lives that are at risk and experiencing overdose here in California. So we're really happy that it's being passed. It was a journey. I guess, yeah, it's definitely a journey to get to this stage of success. But I think throughout all of these lessons learned and best practices, we're a much stronger team than how we first started. My colleagues and I have come from very, as Elizabeth and Janine shared, like very diverse backgrounds in our work. And different experiences when it comes to policy advocacy. We definitely pulled through. I think one of the biggest challenges was to move forward with the proposal because of our interests and our expertise, right? Like with my focus in the Southeast Asian community and programming. I was very interested in mental wellness and youth mental health, versus another one of my team members, very experienced in policy and in immigration rights. And so we had a lot of communication and just these compromises to see like where we can meet and equitably work through a bill. And I think there was a moment where I realized the work that I'm doing right now is also important, but the connections that I'm building with my team, with the mentors, with the SPI staff, and other fellows in the other teams for trauma, reproductive justice. Oh dear, there were other teams, but those are the ones that I'm thinking at the top of my head. Like, we've just gotten so much closer through the seminars and through the retreats. So that's been really just really impactful. Let's see if there's any questions, if I've like missed anything, which I'm sure I did. But if you have any follow-up questions, very happy to share my insights.
Thank you, Tweet. I have one question for you, for applicants. What is something that you didn't expect going into the fellowship that either was a happy surprise or a shock that you felt you could have been a little more prepared for?
Yeah. I would say, like, so before coming into this fellowship, I had like this preconceived notion of how robotic politicians are. Like, I was very intimidated, right? Like, even though I'm here, I live here in Sacramento, and my experience with the Capitol and the legislative process is like surface based. I didn't realize that the staff and partners who are working through this type of movement, they have the same, they're humans as well, and they are very, I don't know, it's less daunting than it was. I mean, it still is like trying to navigate to the swing space and to the Capitol, but everyone's actually quite polite for the most part. There might be some folks who are short on time and they're like, okay, I gotta go, but they're yeah, they want to help you. And that was a pleasant surprise. And I have actually like practiced a lot more of my patience. I was really concerned of like just my anxiety being really high with how much pivoting there was, but working through this bill and seeing the big picture just really gives me more space and capacity to be patient and to understand that, things may not go as we plan for, like with our first phase, I call it, at the beginning, us to scramble for a bill and an author was pretty stressful, right? And still with teamwork, with the mentorship, and keeping the communications with staffers, it definitely opened up my eyes to, hey, like they do want to help us, and they do recognize that SPI is an established organization with really strong and powerful women working towards more progressive causes.
Thank you so much, Twee. And again, if you have a specific question, you can add it in the Q&A. Twee will be with us for the Q&A, so don't be shy. Feel free to ask any question that comes to your mind. And we'll get back to some of the more technical pieces around the seminar, around the Institute. And I'll pass it on to Elizabeth to go over who is eligible to apply.
Thank you, Twee. Thank you, Janine. So the Policy Institute accepts non-binary and genderqueer people, cisgender and transgender women, and transgender men. And while we work hard to make sure that correct pronouns are used by fellows, trainers, and policymakers, we can't control sometimes when someone misgenders someone else. So we just offer this, that recognizing no place is 100% safe. We do strive for a brave space that is welcoming. We put our values first, and that we have procedures in place. So we try to prevent harm or address it when it may occur. We accept individuals living and working in any part of California and working in a community-based or nonprofit setting with the full support of their employer or supervisor, and supervisor. If you are not currently employed by a community-based or nonprofit organization, please email us at the SPI program after this seminar to seek advice about your eligibility. If you are planning on going to school or know you will be changing jobs during the Policy Institute, we do let folks know this might not be a good year to apply. Of course, everyone makes their own decision, but that's just based on experience with previous fellows in different cohorts. And then as part of your application, you will be asked to agree to a full list of participation requirements. And then your supervisor will need to sign the same document or agree to the same agreements. So do yourself, the program, your team, your organization a favor, and don't underestimate or skim past those requirements. And so that applicant requirements agreement form is part of the application and listed fully as a doc for you to read through and download. And then in terms of costs, so thanks to the generous support of many funders and the fundraising that the foundation team and development works to do, the fellowship is free and it is fully subsidized by our foundation. And so the first retreat is in Sacramento. Retreats 2 and 3 will be virtual and on Zoom. And the fourth retreat is back in Sacramento. And the program funds a mentor for each team. And each team is given stipends for costs related to working on their bill in between retreats. So some of the stipends could be printing materials, could be a train ride for a participant to get into Sacramento, etc. And lastly, if you have children or other attendant or like dependent care, we do provide childcare reimbursements to help cover the cost of childcare during the time that you will be in the retreat, both virtually and in person. Just to be clear, we do pay for your travel to Sacramento when we are in person, be it a flight or again, mileage maybe from the Central Valley, etc. So in terms of the application process, please again, read the full application instructions. The online application form on SurveyMonkey will direct you through a set of individual questions for you as an applicant and questions about the organization you represent and are employed by. So you will be prompted to upload a one-page resume, the signed application requirements agreement form. Again, you can download this from the application portal itself. You and your supervisor must initial all of the agreements and sign at the bottom. And if you do not have access to a printer, please make sure to let us know. Although many applicants in the past have used, a local copy service. And so as part of the application, one of the tasks as well is an individual narrative or like essay-like portion, which entails answering a series of questions that you can find in the application form, again, in the portal SurveyMonkey Apply. Please refer to the instructions on SurveyMonkey Apply, creating an account there for more specifics. And then I do want to point out two specific questions on the individual narrative section. We ask you to include a paragraph from your supervisor, and your supervisor should describe why your participation will benefit the rest of your organization or department within your workspace, and that they should include their name, title, and their email, and that this should be written out and then it should be written and then you would upload it into the system. And then we ask you to describe how you will manage participation also in a process that is not always safe for individuals who have experienced oppression and or trauma. And so that's just, we're again asking you to reflect and let us know how you will manage this process. And then the final thing I do want to point out is for the narrative that's not from your employer, that there is an option of a video response for the narrative. The majority of applicants do a written response, but the feature on SurveyMonkey Apply does have a video narrative, or like a possibility of you to recording yourself and uploading video to make sure that we have accessibility for different kinds of applications. So the issue areas this year. So we are receiving issue area. The 4 issue areas this year are different from the current cohort. So we aim to feature teams working to address racism, anti-Blackness, and cis heteropatriarchy through the following specific areas: criminal justice reform, economic security, reproductive health, rights and justice, and for this year only, a team focusing on sheltering survivors. That is looking at the intersection of gender-based violence and housing. And so that's instead of having the trauma services and prevention team that we currently have, for example. You'll find the complete descriptions of these 4 issue areas on the application page in our website. And so notice under each issue area, there are sub-issues, So 2 points to remember is that the foundation works to select teams with some commonality within these big umbrellas. So a team has a common ground to pick a bill idea. And a reminder that these issue areas are very broad. So while your team may develop, basically referring to what Janine said previously, your team may end up picking, developing, and going with a bill idea that doesn't 100% align with your work at your organization. And that needs to be okay with your team, with your supervisor, so your team can have a viable learning experience in the tight legislative deadline. So again, the focus is while we want everyone to feel comfortable in the issue area and or align with your work, ultimately what matters is that you get the learning process and get to the governor's desk, right? So it might not always match up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. In order to know for the selection criteria, there is a selection committee that convenes in August to decide on finalists. So after going through the process, you'll have interviews, and then from the interviews go through another a selection committee, and fellows will be selected through a competitive application process. We'll select approximately 20 fellows in total. Applicants will be contacted by email by August 15th to inform them of the committee's decision. Just to reiterate, successful individual applicants will possess deep content knowledge, which can be lived, learned, or from work, an ability to get along with others, how participating in the SPI will increase the policy advocacy work at your organization or in your community, commitment to learning and full participation, and full support of your employer during and between retreats. How we build teams is teams of fives will have a diversity of experience and geographic representation, diversity of backgrounds, age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, ability, etc., and similar policy interests with within each primary issue area. And we'd like to remind you, to conclude by reminding you that we take many factors into consideration when selecting the fellows for each cohort. And if you're not admitted this year, please try again next year. We strongly encourage second and third applications, and often, if you're not selected in the first year, you can get selected in the second year. It is a competitive cycle, and so we always encourage you to please continue to apply. If for this year there wasn't a well matched team. So now we'll be transitioning into the Q&A portion of the seminar. So please right now and use the Q&A box for all questions. And any questions that we don't get to, we'll send a follow-up email with. And our last seminar that will be happening in 2 weeks will also have a Q&A section if you have unresolved questions.
I wanted to uplift Janine. There was a question already posed that I answered written, but I can reshare. It was asked if other organizations can co-sponsor the Solís Policy Institute bills, and yes, so all teams deliberate amongst themselves, consult staff at the foundation about who may co-sponsor their bill, and again, it's all a combination of what's strategic and what's feasible for the process. The question and answer box feature is at the bottom ribbon band with a box with a question inside, so please use the tool. Something that we should name is COVID protocols for when we gather in person. We do require those at-home test kits prior to travel, while you're at the event. We have we have PPE gear available, but and then we also just watch trends. If the county that we are in changes COVID-related protocols or other health-related protocols, we will follow suit. But I do want to note that we do require and are always reviewing our COVID protocols. And so one of that right now is the rapid testing. And then additionally, that we also don't have the capacity to host virtual participation at our in-person gathering. And so the first retreat in Sacramento is in person. We don't have the capacity to Zoom someone in essentially. And then every other thing is virtual programming. And then our next retreat, our bill pitching day in January is in person. And then the final retreat is in person in Sacramento. So just letting people know about we're hybrid in that way. And that also we're trying to follow the nature of the business in the capital, where it used to be right where the pandemic began, everything was virtual, then it was hybrid. And so we're following suit with the changing nature of the capital, where essentially everything's in person now.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So one of the next questions was, are you open to applicants who have little to no experience in legislative policy, but are interested in stepping into this space? Yes. And so what we say is that this is where an example where it would be helpful, for example, if your supervisor explains, by your participation, we are exploring as an organization how we can take on policy. Or some of our fellows have used this experience and then become the policy associate of their respective organization. And so that's a really great example of how we do, that is our goal, is to bring in you and your organizations, especially from communities who are less resourced, right, to travel to Sacramento, et cetera. And so some of the strongest applications are explicitly saying so. There is no prior experience required, but we do want to hear about your interest, why, and we want to hear how you will leverage this experience in the future. And then thank you so much for your thorough presentation is the next question. I'm wondering if you could share the typical age range of any given cohort. So there's no minimum or maximum age, definitely. And so I would say some of our cohorts can have people who are in their first full-time paid gig right out of college to folks who are elders in our movement and are the EDs of their organization and have now the time to do more policy work themselves. So for example, that could be 50s, 60s. I do believe in the application we do ask for age because we do want to have a diverse class, although it's more like a bell curve where there are a lot of folks who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, but it is not in any way requirements. And we do want to have a class that has representation of the spectrum. Another question is, I know this was mentioned briefly, but we wanted to know what happens if we miss a retreat session. So generally what we do is we require if you, for example, can't attend a seminar, we require that when a fellow misses a seminar where there's a recording, you watch the seminar and let us know what questions are still pending for you. So we want to make sure that folks who miss seminars are watching the recordings, and then you tell us what is still missing or what is still a question mark for you or things that you need further explained or explored. And then when it comes to the retreat, which is the in-person programming, we do not record those. Again, we need in-person participation for in-person events. But we have had fellows, right, that had to come in a day late due to a personal emergency. We ask that you check in with your team to be caught up on materials, to go through the slides our presenters may have used, and just basically for your personal learning, but also to keep pace with your team, do what you can to catch up. Is there anything you want to add on that, Janine?
No, I think I want to go to the next question that we got that was specific to TWE, which was, can you describe how you balance dedicated time towards the Institute and your regular workload at your organization? How does the learning and experience from the Institute show up in your current work?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, Monica. So, first is communicating with my supervisor has been priority, and she actually she's an SPI alumni, so she understands that balance between the fellowship and work, and she gave me some insights. I live by my calendar, my Google Calendar, so we plan ahead. As soon as I got accepted, we put down the dates and also informed her about the weekly meetings. So basically jigsawed everything throughout the year. But I think due to just like the nature of life and things coming up, staying communicative towards with my boss and with the SPI staff, we're able to work some things together in order to manage the workload. As much as I love to do like self-care, I integrate I integrate like what I love to do for work and just like who I am. Like that intersectionality is something I'm still working through and navigating, but there's been a lot more of like space and balance and more importantly like grace for myself, and that's something that I like share with you all. This is a lot of work. There's going to be some later days, maybe late nights to advance a bill and to communicate with the staffer. But knowing like just gaining the experience and the knowledge over, oh my gosh, it's been almost a year. So like over the 7 months, it's showing up right now. I am part of a mental health task force with the Asian Health Services and other partners in this coalition, where A lot of folks are from out of town, and so they look to me to be like, how do we navigate to the Capitol and to the swing space? What floor? And so through SPI and through the lobbying experience, I'm able to support them with that, to be a convener. Also, my colleague at Andrew Lee at CRAC, and he's the senior policy manager. We're working together right now for our Southeast Asian American Collaborative, which has about 15 organizations, executive directors, as well as managers and other staff who are involved to develop a leadership cohort where we can do a little bit of policy seeding for this upcoming year and to really advance our priorities as a coalition. And so I'm really excited and very inspired from this fellowship to carry on that work into the community. So I hope that answers your question, Monica.
There's another question for you, Twee, of how many hours a week did you dedicate to SPI?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So this was something that my supervisor and I discussed, and about 25% of my workload would be dedicated. So our work week also is reflective of Women's Foundation of California. So it's a 32-hour work week, and a quarter of that will be dedicated to this fellowship.
I do want to commend you and acknowledge, Tweet, that there are legislative deadlines, and so there is fluctuations. So I do want to recognize that, especially since you were the Sacramento-based team member during the bill pitching deadlines. I recall you were there like almost every day in talking to legislators, and that was a rare occurrence. But just the nature of the legislative process means there are occasional like bubble ups where you're like, you know, the legislative process is set in stone. We have to move along with it. So both shout out to you, Tweet, for pulling up for the team, and then also just acknowledging that.
Yeah, I think like for me, I was really excited for this opportunity because my work is mainly remote. Our California team is spread throughout the state, and so for me to have this opportunity and lobby, I'm like, yes, I'm it. Like that was a role that I've dedicated myself as we started this fellowship. Right, I'm like, I'm here. I can help out. I can be a scout, and yeah, I just went with it. But like I know that we can set ourselves these expectations and also know that we can lean on the support of our team. And if it wasn't for my team, doing all of the important things on the back end and communicating with the author's office, I think I would have been just like lost in there. So yeah, I'm just part of that equation. And so thank you.
Another question we have is, what if the nonprofit I'm working with or the board I serve on is not my primary day job, but it's the one directly relevant to women's issues? Can I ask the board president slash nonprofit president to sign the contract with me? So I would say there's two factors with that. There's two elements of that question. One is that when you're in the Policy Institute, one of the things we're asking your employer is can we affiliate you with that organization? And so that's one question to pose that they can answer yes. The other is just about your time availability. And so I recognize more and more of our nonprofit space includes people who are self-employed, contractors with more than one gig. And so for us, it would mean yes, you can have them sign off the applicant requirements agreement, but that we also, you reach out to us about like, how does that puzzle work for you? So that is there another contract, or what is the nature of your consulting, of your business, of your contract work, and talking to us about how it will still allow you to participate in this rigorous program. So the answer is yes, with those two lenses that we ask folks to reach out to in case you are in that bucket. So the next question is, I was born and raised in California. I work remotely for a nonprofit in California. I've been with them for 10 years. I've recently moved to Las Vegas. Would I still qualify as an applicant? I think so, but Janine, do you have an answer?
I think for case by case questions like this and the question from the person who's a student asking about school credit, we really encourage you all to email us these questions so we can set up a time and a conversation around it, and we can talk more about, where are some of our requirements coming from around why it is the way that it is, but also wanting to hear about your experience and to see if this would be the best fit right now. So I encourage you all for questions like this to email us, and we'll do our best to get back to you soon and to set up a conversation to talk more about it, because really our intention with the program is we know it's rigorous. We know there are things out of our control, like the legislative calendar, but we want to make sure that you're able to get the most out of the experience and to build on it. Like we mentioned, we encourage all of our fellows to come in and write out their goals at the beginning of the year, their individual, their professional, the goal of the team, and really take the time throughout the fellowship to do what you need to do to be able to get that, and see how the foundation can support you and how the institute can support you in growing on your journey. And so we encourage you all to email us on that. And we have time for one more question. If anyone has a question, I would encourage you all to tweet a question while we still have her. And then if not, we'll close out.
I also do want to note that the web page has some other frequently asked questions that perhaps we haven't gotten to. So please browse through those questions with some extensive answers.
If we don't have a question, Twee, is there any advice that you would give to any applicants about maybe the application process or the fellowship process or any piece as they begin on this journey?
Yeah, I think this is gonna sound really cliche, but truly write from your heart. I think like there I grew up in a time where like these personal statements are like, I'm the best at this and I'm like really good at that. And I think when you're considering to apply and reviewing the questions, rather than, like say, I topped this, think of like how I approached it was, like what my personal mission is and what I stand for. Just showing that through, and like my community is it's a small scope, like Southeast Asian community, Vietnamese, and just coming from that lens of like my background and what I've done, it'll like diminish some of that like negative self-talk. Oh, sorry. So yeah, just coming from that lens, it does have moments of like self-reflection, and I think I learned a lot about myself through this application. And so I I connect it to be like something deeper because I do believe in that policy advocacy is a space for us, is a space for myself. And I think from that is is really meaningful. And hopefully that'll flow for you all. And uh I don't know if you want me to like write down my email if you have further questions, but I'm more than happy to share that with Janine and Elizabeth, just giving that consent.
Thank you so much, Twee. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate you all taking your lunch break to come meet with us. Just a reminder that the entire application, including the required attachment signed by your supervisor and yourself must be completed and submitted by 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday, June 27th. And once you complete the application, you'll receive an email confirmation for receipt, and interviews will be held July 22nd through August 2nd. So please hold those dates. And know that not every applicant will be interviewed. Decisions will be released no later than August 5th. And we encourage your application, again, even if you don't have policy experience or even if you've never considered entering the policy field. If you have any questions about the Solís Policy Institute, please refer to our FAQ or contact us by email at SPI at womensfoundca.org, which we'll drop in the chat. And we'll follow up again with an email where you'll receive the recording of this webinar. So thank you all so much for your time, and we look forward to reviewing your application. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.